the self beneath the survival. Many women spend years learning about trauma. They learn about people-pleasing, emotional responsibility, hypervigilance, boundaries, survival roles. They begin to understand what happened to them. But eventually a deeper question appears. If survival shaped who you became, who were you before survival? The Inner Child series explores the younger self that still exists beneath adaptation. Not as a separate person, not as a spiritual concept, but as the emotional self that was forced to develop around environments that felt unsafe, unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, or conditional. Together we explore childhood emotional neglect, emotional survival roles, the nervous system and emotional memory, reparenting, self-trust, identity reconstruction, boundaries and autonomy. Because healing is not about becoming someone new, it is about reconnecting with the self that survival required you to leave behind. Part 1 of Your Inner Child Never Disappeared. The discovery question. Why do certain situations still make you feel like a child? Many people assume childhood exists only in memory, something that happened, something that ended. But emotional development does not work that way. The younger versions of ourselves do not disappear simply because we become adults. When children experience chronic emotional stress, unpredictability, criticism, neglect, rejection, or fear, parts of emotional development can become organized around survival rather than growth. The body grows older, the responsibilities change, life moves forward. But certain emotional reactions remain connected to the age at which those experiences occurred. This is why criticism can sometimes feel overwhelming, why rejection can feel devastating, why conflict can feel dangerous, why some situations create emotional reactions that seem much larger than the moment itself. The inner child is not a separate personality living inside you. It is the younger emotional self that adapted to survive experiences it was never fully supported through. Healing begins when we stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened to the younger version of me that still influences how I experience safety, connection, and self-worth today?" Because one of the most confusing parts of healing is realizing that sometimes our reactions seem much bigger than the situation in front of us. You might receive a small piece of criticism from a manager at work. Nothing aggressive, nothing cruel, just feedback. And yet something inside you immediately tightens. Your chest feels heavy, your stomach drops. You replay the conversation for hours. You begin questioning yourself, questioning your competence, questioning your worth. Logically, you understand what happened, but emotionally it feels much bigger. Or perhaps a partner becomes distant for a few days. Maybe they are stressed. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they simply need some space. The adult part of you understands this. But another part immediately begins searching for danger. Have I done something wrong? Are they angry with me? Are they losing interest? Are they about to leave? Or someone sounds disappointed? A friend cancels plans. A text message goes unanswered. You notice people talking without including you, and suddenly feelings appear that seem far larger than the moment itself. This is often where people become frustrated with themselves. They tell themselves, "I know I'm overreacting. I know this shouldn't affect me. I know I'm being irrational." But despite knowing all of that, they cannot stop. And the reason is often much simpler than people realize. The adult mind is responding to what is happening, but the emotional system is responding to what it resembles. The situation in front of you may not be dangerous, but it may feel similar to something your younger self experienced long ago. The criticism resembles rejection. The silence resembles abandonment. The disappointment resembles disapproval. The exclusion resembles not belonging. And before you even consciously realize it, your emotional system begins responding as though the old experience is happening again. Not because you are weak, not because you are broken, but because emotional systems learn through repetition. If certain experiences were repeatedly connected to pain, fear, shame, rejection, or instability, your nervous system learns to recognize similar patterns long before your conscious mind catches up. This is one of the reasons inner child work matters. Because healing is not only about understanding your present reactions, it is about understanding where those reactions were first learned. Section 2. The difference between memory and emotional memory. Many people assume that healing is simply remembering what happened, but memory is more complicated than that. Most of us can remember events from childhood. We remember schools, homes, teachers, family gatherings, arguments, moments that hurt us, moments that shaped us. Those are cognitive memories. They are memories we can consciously recall. But emotional memory works differently. Emotional memory is not stored as a story. It is stored as a response. This is why someone can have very little memory of childhood and still carry the effects of it every single day. Because emotional memory often shows up through behavior. It appears as people-pleasing, automatically putting other people's needs ahead of your own. It appears as over-explaining, feeling the need to justify every decision so nobody becomes upset with you. It appears as perfectionism, believing mistakes are dangerous rather than human. It appears as conflict avoidance, doing almost anything to prevent tension, disagreement, or disapproval. And it appears as emotional responsibility, feeling responsible for how everyone else feels while neglecting how you feel. These behaviors can become so normal that they simply feel like personality. But many of them began as adaptations. Solutions created by a younger version of you trying to stay emotionally safe. This is why healing is not always about remembering more. Sometimes healing is about recognizing the ways old experiences continue to influence present behavior. The memory is not only remembered, the memory is lived. Every day. Every time you silence yourself. Every time you apologize for existing. Every time you prioritize everyone else. Every time you abandon your own needs. The emotional memory is still speaking, not through words, but through patterns. And until those patterns are understood, they often continue repeating themselves long after the original circumstances have disappeared. Section 3. Why awareness is only the beginning. Eventually, many women reach a moment of awareness, a moment where things begin making sense. They discover childhood emotional neglect. They learn about trauma. They recognize survival roles. They begin understanding the nervous system. And suddenly, they find themselves saying, "I know where this comes from." For many people, this feels like a breakthrough, and it is. Awareness matters. Understanding matters. Naming the wound matters. But something often happens after that. Weeks pass, months pass, sometimes years pass, and despite understanding where the patterns came from, the patterns themselves remain. The people-pleasing continues. The hypervigilance continues. The self-doubt continues. The emotional responsibility continues. And this can feel incredibly discouraging. Because if awareness was enough, everything would change the moment we understood it. But awareness and healing are not the same thing. Awareness helps us understand the wound. Healing helps us transform our relationship with it. Awareness says, "Now I understand why I feel this way." Healing says, "What do I need to do differently now?" Awareness reveals the younger self. Healing begins reconnecting with that younger self. Awareness identifies survival. Healing begins creating safety. Awareness explains the pattern. Healing slowly changes the pattern. This is why this series exists, not simply to help you understand your inner child, but to help you understand how that younger version of you may still be influencing your nervous system, your relationships, your sense of identity, your boundaries, your choices, and your relationship with yourself. Because the goal is not simply to understand what happened. The goal is to understand how it still lives within you today. And more importantly, how healing can begin creating something different. If today's episode resonated with you, this is only the beginning of the journey. In Part 2, we'll explore childhood emotional neglect and the missing self, and what happens when nobody teaches you who you are. In Part 3, we'll uncover the survival roles you were forced to become, and why adaptation is not the same as identity. And in Part 4, we'll begin exploring reparenting and what it truly means to give yourself what was missing. So, if you're ready to understand the self beneath the survival, make sure you're subscribed and follow the series so you don't miss the next episode. And remember, awareness is where healing begins, but it is not where healing ends.